getting started, just because I want to give my class an opportunity to make the decision on their own. Apparently the 401JS is happening at the same time. So if you're interested in looking at the 401s over the 301s, it's fitting in the next room. Sorry, it feels like a walkout.
Yeah, walk out. It'll also be nested, so keep that in mind too.
Yeah. But if you're going to the 301, you should probably be in this one. Just saying.
Yeah. Let the next camera know.
Yeah, either way, you'll have access to any of these things. All right, cool. So we have like a minute. We'll just do a quick little introduction / talk. So first and foremost, I'm really proud of all the 301 students. You guys have done a fantastic job this round. These projects are awesome. So 201 students, anybody else in here, you guys are going to see some really, really cool final projects using some really awesome technologies and really kind of showcasing what it's like to build a single page web application. So first up, we've got Find a Hike, and we'll let you guys just go ahead and do your thing. Cool. All right, so we're Find a Hike. Our mission, when we set out to do, was provide pretty much a huge resource that had a big database for hikes in Washington State. We had noticed that in our research as we're trying to find data that many sites didn't have a way that you could really optimize your search for specific hikes or in specific trails and in specific areas of the state. And so we wanted to provide that. In our research, it was really hard to find a data set that was actually useful, that had very useful information as far as length of hikes and elevation gain, ratings for certain hikes.
Basically, the ones that had useful information were really hard to access.
Yeah,
and the ones that were easy to access had terrible information.
Yeah. So the one we ended up finding, there was no way that we could do an AJAX request to pull data from their site. So we found the URL link to their entire database, and Susan and I spent about 10-15 hours formatting the entire data set. It ended up being like 26,000 lines.
It was a JSON file.
Yeah. But we got that all formatted, and this is our site. Jeff, do you want to talk about the weather bar and logo?
The weather bar, which is just right up here, it's actually it's called Simple Weather .js, and it's actually leveraging the Yahoo Weather API. And so when you actually when you load the page, normally for the first time it'll ask you for your location, but since we've already got this loaded, it's already knows our location. But yeah, that's right. So it is pulling in live data for your temperature, city conditions, and also the Celsius.
Sure.
Okay. We implemented the BX slider here, and so it's super easy to implement.
These are all photos from a friend of mine, photographer, who went on a trip through Washington State up into British Columbia. And we also we had this on an auto scroll, but we found sometimes when you use our map down below or go to one of our pages and come back to the home page, the scroll would stop and you wouldn't be able to scroll, and other times it would work totally fine, no errors in the console or anything. So
and it actually wasn't something we were able to figure out exactly what kind of path would break it, because it would follow the exact same path, and sometimes it would break and sometimes it wouldn't.
So we took it out for our presentation, but going forward, if we want to fix this, I'm sure we could find a way to make the auto scroll work all the time.
Base slider's pretty cool. It's just super easy and it's responsive. So we scaled this down to and a scale.
Nice. Looks nice on the phone and everything.
I'll turn it over to
Sure. So, primary functionality is the way our app mostly works is so we're Washington based, so we're giving a map of Washington. And this little marker is draggable. And you can move them anywhere you want on this map. Let's move them to Seattle, say. And you can see it's logging and saving in a JavaScript object. It's current latitude and longitude as well. So, if I select the latitude and longitude by using that little marker, I can move around as much as I want. And then say, look for hikes within 50 miles of wherever I put my marker. And click go. Okay.
Just click on some of it.
Custom.
So, we utilize the marker cluster library to show you hikes all around. So the way marker cluster works is if there's just one in a certain area, depending on your zoom level, it'll show you the marker itself. And if there are too many, it lets you click in. Then you click in. Hikes, hikes, hikes.
The cool thing when you zoom back out, it'll recluster them based on your channel level as well.
That's sweet.
And that was really valuable for you guys because you had how many?
So many.
Yeah, we had 2,100 objects in our database, so if they all had just their individual kind of the standard default marker, a lot of them would overlap, especially on the blown out view. It would just be a bunch of markers just placed randomly. This makes it so that you can easily access very certain plots or areas within your search.
All right, so next up, we've got our secondary filters and most of our main limitations that we run into. Sure. How do you access the console? Okay. So, we set up these secondary filters that allow you to select the maximum distance for your hike, the maximum elevation gain, and the minimum rating, which are all based on properties that each object has. So, the first thing that we just straight up did not do that we missed was if we were to refactor this, we'd probably end up making these all into one select field so that you could utilize routes and put in a select query, which query string, which we do not have currently. So we're not utilizing the CTX object. This would not persist across data reload. But the reason we had it set up like that was because we wanted each of these filters to work off of the select. So if I select a maximum distance here of 15, it immediately gets rid of all the hikes that are more than 15 miles long. And the idea was that way you can mix and match at will. And it's immediately responsive.
So are these done off of on-chain events?
Yes,
Nice.
something else that came up, and this is why we have this big giant console log over here. Maybe Rick has told a few of you about this. This is the strangest darn thing going on in our filter. So, I've set up a console log to tell you the marker's name, the marker's length, or the marker's distance, the distance we selected, which is always 15, you can see over here. So, name, the selected distance, the trail's distance, and then this value false. I'm console logging the comparison between the two. Now, anything that's less, whenever this value is less than the right value, you should always see a true here, like you see here. However, on about half of,
It's decimals. You can't do comparisons with decimals.
Oh.
We ran into
I think they actually did remove.
No.
Tried it with decimals and without decimals. Just
Oh,
did that.
Yeah, they did remove. Yeah.
Yeah, 10.6 is evaluating true.
But 4 is false. 13.6 is true.
2.6 is false. So,
No idea
we
why.
left this as kind of a monument to, we have no idea what's going on here. And now, the other most person have our stuff. Did you want to?
But yeah, so I mean, to the base functionality. After the initial radius selection, it moves everything to a different array, and then all these secondary filters work off of that array. So the maximum distance will decrease the objects in that array based on that, and then further from that, you can do elevation gain, which further narrows it down. So this really helps out finding like very individual hikes.
But again, it's filtering way more than it should, so
Yeah.
that compounds when you write multiple filters.
Yeah.
Even if it's like 5 hikes.
And one more thing that we wanted to add but didn't have the time to was just a simple map reload or map reset button here on our map instead of having to reload the page. So that's something we can do going forward as well.
Because as set up, those filters reduce your array. They were building the markers off. It doesn't rebuild that array every time.
So that's basically the basic functionality of our site. We also have an about page, simple about page with group members, a little paragraph about us, and contact form. We were looking into writing a little PHP script so it would actually send an email to where we wanted to send, but at the moment it's if you enter these fields and change it, it'll just take you to your default mail like browser application on your computer with the email address in the title group too, but wouldn't grab any of the field values. So that could be something that we could improve going forward as well. But besides that, the project.
I have a question.
Yes.
So, in terms of the massive amount of data that you've been working with, did you find that functional programming methods in general really helped out with this?
Oh, for sure. We use the dot filter method and for each in pretty much every one of our secondary filters and the main filter.
We never end up using reduce.
Didn't use reduce. I mean,
That's cool.
Yeah. But filter was huge. This is all filter right here.
So we used map a few times too.
Sweet.
Yeah. Awesome. Any more questions?
Yeah, if you had to start it over from scratch, what would you do?
I wanted only to, like I said, have all the secondary filters as a select field so that we can send off a query string, and that way we can utilize the CPX object.
What was different about this project week versus previous project weeks you had that
For me, it was figuring out how you're going to attain your data and how you're going to filter through your data and what you want to actually spit out as useful information for the user. That took us up until Wednesday afternoon, so pretty much 3 straight days of figuring that out.
And especially this one, we spent a lot more time messing around with APIs and the external libraries we wanted to utilize, and so the concepts that we had from class kind of had to be unlocked.
Yep. So, I think in general, it was much more of a shift into like kind of a programming nature more than like an actual modified front-end kind of nature of this aspect, right? Yeah. Sweet. Awesome.
What percentage of time do you think you spend in research trying to figure out how to use those APIs versus like modeling your data and starting to write your program?
Oh, I spent all of Monday messing around with Google Maps effortlessly.
Yeah, just the individual marker that you initially start out with and being able to drag that around and pop up a latitude, longitude for wherever you drop it. I think that took a day and a half by itself. So pretty much early part of the week, definitely figure out your resources, how they work, how you're going to obtain your data, and then once you have all that figured out.
Also, Google Maps does not like being in like a pretty much empty HTML file with no CSS. It does not like that.
Yeah, I know.
You will end up thinking you're creating problems when there are no problems.
Containing blocks.
So, for 201 students that are moving into 301, just know that pretty much every previous cohort, every team uses Google Maps. So if you want to just get a head start,
Might as well.
Yep, every single one of them does it every single time. So, yep.
You guys said you were struggling with the .dx call. Did you guys consider maybe using a .json or just general?
We did.
Yeah, we did. It was I don't know if WTA, this is all from WTA, Washington Trail Association. I don't know if they necessarily wanted this available for like ADAC requests and polls. We went to their site and
They don't wrap the function, was it?
they had a huge map similar to ours with just every single plot down, and we just inspected that map and ended up looking for the sources and found the file that they used. And we couldn't figure out to do a HREX request from that file or through their site, so we ended up just pulling it locally.
So you just have that as a local JSON file?
Yeah, we
Because you found it in your sources when you're looking for this.
Well, you can make a proxy request out and grab that data, right? But to remove that complexity layer, that's why they did
But
that.
they weren't even, the other website wasn't even using a request, they just had the file in their sources? And so you guys just downloaded that and you're like...
We just put it in our browser and it just put out a huge, super long page of just a gigantic array of JSON objects.
Just like you're going to make a request to that, you just couldn't do it due to course issues.
Oh, totally.
Yep.
Course issues.
Yeah, right. It's another thing you should look at 201 students.
Yeah.
Because everybody dealt with that too. Nice. Awesome. All right, awesome job, guys. Thank you. All right, up next is Snap.
Wasn't that, no, the map, the marker structure is really cool. It's actually just a line on side. It's not a ton of features, but yeah, right.
Cool. So, Snap, I'm going to let you guys talk about the overall functionality and features of the app itself, as well as give you guys a little bit of information about the program. But essentially what Snap is and what we're looking to do, essentially, have you guys ever heard of the food stamp program? Now it's the SNAP program. So we want to be able to identify and plot on this map the locations of places that accept the EBT cards. One of the things that we ran into that was really complicated is this isn't a very popular thing, so the data source was really hard for us to get, right? So we ran into some of the similar issues that our counterparts did. In regards to technologies, for the front end, obviously we leverage jQuery, handlebars. You see Google Maps here. We have various miscellaneous plugins that we also leverage to kind of give it that pop, that pizzazz. In regards to the back end and our hosting, we chose to use Firebase over other options. And we also use Firebase as our database, as our back-end database. For routing, we used Page.js and a lot of our logic and just the calculations, just plain old vanilla JavaScript. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Marshall.
Sure. So we were thinking with this Snap project, a lot of people use Snap. There's over 1 million people in Washington, 15% of households in the state are Snap users. So we're thinking, right now the government applications that are available online, there's a few of them, they don't work that great. So we were thinking, why not try to create an all-in-one app that can really serve people's needs. Here, Mike, let me show you. Sure. Yeah. So it's pretty simple. We're able to we can just drag or click on different parts. Click on different parts of the map, and it'll plot the about 25 of the nearest locations to wherever you click. All these places are different stories here. We can take a look at them on the sidebar here.
Yeah, just an arbitrary number. So one of the things I should have opened up with too, we started with over 260,000 data points. So we really just chose to focus and narrow in our scope to Washington State itself.
Yeah.
Which still gave us approximately 5,000 to 6,000 objects that we're working with right now.
Yeah, 5,059 objects to be exact. It's a ton of data.
Yes.
How did you filter that down?
You can select from the. Okay, got it. I guess we haven't explained this yet, but
I was expecting the large.
But the problem was that this information wasn't available as an API, so we had to download it locally. But we could download local
it out prior to making our own. So we're still making the JSON request, but it's a local file, kind of like what Duncan pointed out earlier. So it's local data. But then how are we filtering through these 6,000? We're using we took a look at the Haversing and the Pythagorean theorem, but since we're not like taking into account the longitude and latitude across the world, we're not crossing the equator or the meridian, right? We use the Euclidean formula that we used and we calculate the distance from where we're interested in to these other locations. Anyways, back in JS now.
Before I pass it off to Marcus to give the design perspective, also I'll talk about our little CodePen CSS animation thing we brought from the CodePen site. I don't know if any of you guys used it before. It's pretty sweet, straightforward. We have these nice little pop-ups that can explain, just kind of get the site some context, our mission, yada, yada, yada. We have a little slight little about thing. We wanted to have some cute little pictures, but we kind of ran out of time. And some helpful resources, just typical stuff, nutritional facts, how to build menus, living on a budget, kind of thing. And Marcus used Photoshop to create this nice little tutorial guide for anybody that might not understand how to use the site right off the bat. It's pretty sweet.
Yeah, like many people have seen or will see, right? Dealing with plugins can be a gift and a curse. So this right here is a plugin that we're utilizing, and then we were trying to mix another plugin, the BX Slider, and essentially they didn't work well together, so we went with a single image.
Are you using FancyBox for this?
Actually, we had a lot of problems with FancyBox. It was not working for some reason with the client-side routing. Oh, is that right?
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, anyway, so we built our own.
Oh, yeah. That's just making it with a sweet.
So they built their own modal, which is like awesome.
That's a task in its own.
Yeah, right.
So I'm going to talk about the design aspect. Actually, I have slides for the design first. So we really design our layout ahead of time. This is our original design. It's not much different than the final project.
Yeah, one of the things to point out there, right, you'll notice that we originally had the Google Maps markers, but Marcus went ahead and created our own custom markers. So you'll notice up in the top tab and markers throughout the page, that's our own custom markers, so to speak.
Yeah, so we really make our color thing to up to 3 color with various of grayscale, and then just want to make it nice and clean. And for the fonts family, we're using the default fonts family from the skeleton, and then we also use SAS. It's a great tool to it means scalable and then less code. So
How did you guys do your SAS?
yeah, it's just fantastic. Same thing. Yeah, auto compile.
Yeah. Did you have it watching your file system, or did you just compile it each time and make CSS changes?
Yeah, I think it's plugin in the item.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a local plugin that Marcus used like crazy, but being able to leverage SAS was so awesome, right? And essentially every time we saved it, auto-compiled and spit out the results that we wanted.
Nice.
What was that plugin that you used? SAS dash auto-compile.
So APMs, did you APM for?
Yeah,
it was all packaged for apps.
Oh, it's an add okay. So for the general page layout, so for the slide bar, slide in, slide out, we're using the negative value, negative position value, so you can say negative 300 pixel out.
While you're talking about the slide bar, one of the things that was really cool that you notice Marcus did is when we had that up and then he drug the page down, that sidebar wasn't going all the way down. There's actually a feature that he built in that automatically detects the length of the page and renders it according to the size of.
This is an excellent representation of going from like a mock-up and an actual design guide or style guide to something physical and tangible on the front end. This is awesome.
So machine the loading CSS brand told us to do. So it's a CSS animation sitting on the background, and then once the data is loaded, we'll convert the the loading is so fast that you can see the loading.
Yeah, this
Which is not a bad problem. Yeah.
And we also implement if you hover a specific marker in the map, it will highlight on the slide bar. So,
What about the review system? Is that in place?
Not yet.
No, it's there. We're just not talking about it.
yeah.
Nice.
Okay, yeah. So I worked on, I worked on the review system and the search system. So there's also this, which I guess is
That takes some while.
yeah. But so you can do searches as autocomplete. So like 7-Eleven. So you can see all the 7-Elevens. Oops, I clicked on start. But yeah, and then if you find a particular store, like let's say we want to review this one, we can click on it, it shows up over here. We go to the reviews, and our reviews tab, read review. This was so you can go to the reviews. It's there.
So is that all locally saved at the moment?
It's Firebase.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
So you can
Yep. We are using the backend database. This is our own review system that the team built, right? Some of the things that Justin's just not. Anyways, some of the magic that you did was amazing, right? The search doesn't leverage an API, and it's because our data isn't available to Google. Google doesn't have a section that's called EBT, inside of Google Places API. So Justin had to build the logic, and as a team, we had to build the logic to be able to, when we search, we're only searching our local data. We'll put that autocomplete, right? So super cool.
Also, that's the review and search system. I don't think there's.
One last thing. This is a single-page web application. And that was our goal, right? We didn't want to be transitioning to multiple pages or anything like that. And a lot of other people do. And that's great, but for the most part, yeah.
You do have like pages.
We do have pages.
Like it.
Yeah, we leverage Page.js for routing, but the look and feel of this, we definitely wanted it to be a single-page web application.
Nice. So your URL structure still represents like where you're at in the process.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice.
Whether you're in the search bar, whether you're in the About Us, it's using routing and that functionality within the controller. Yeah, the look and feel is single-page web app. Yeah.
How responsive is it? How well does it work on a mobile device? Because a lot of people that need this might not have a desktop computer.
Yeah, the only thing is if you shut down the browser, the button will not work well at the mobile, but the rest of it works fine. I mean, for this kind of layout, there's no, we don't use the medium query this space. It's just a slide.
You really don't need to, honestly. Yeah. I mean, you can just close that and then you can do what you need to do. Yeah, it's nice.
Yeah, what would you guys do? What would we do differently, right? We would spend more time, right? Only having 4 days to work on this. We definitely took a mobile-first approach, but then some of these other complications kind of came up and trumped other things sometimes.
So with any project, the scope varies tremendously sometimes, and the user stories can dip, from project to project. So how did you guys manage those goals, and what worked well in helping manage all of this?
So we did a mix of things, right? One of the things that I'd say everybody did phenomenally is we were communicating like crazy, right? We leveraged Slack, we leveraged cell phones numbers, we each had each other's cell phone numbers, we were sending texts. But then we also leverage Google Docs as a nice starter and nice framework. And then we also heavily leveraged Waffle.io, which is awesome. It's one of the project management systems, but one of the cool things about Waffle.io is that it actually integrates with Git issues. And you'll hear that term, issues, right? But issue just represents, an issue, a task, a feature, something you're working on. But being able to have this project management framework that also integrates with GitHub itself is amazing.
Awesome. Fantastic job.
All right, next up we got Ed Tracker.
Web Tracker is designed to let users easily find tide pooling locations near them, as well as tell users what time the next low tide is, and you can see a forecast of tide data. And the reason we wanted to do this and make it mobile friendly was because there's just not a lot of places to get tide pooling locations by beach. The government provides tide data, but only by the station you're at. And you can go to a specific park page and perhaps pull up a PDF tide table, but nothing you could really access easily on your phone. And so that's why we made our web tracker. Some of our user stories were, so I want to find tide pooling locations and go tide pooling when tide is low so I don't die. Check tide locations that I plan to visit. I want to be able to view it on my mobile device. I want to suggest tide pooling locations to be added to the app. I want to see a full list of available locations. And I want to easily search through that list of available locations. And then as developers, we want to follow MVC and OOP principles and organize our CSS snack and integrate Google Maps for user-friendly visual representation of user locations. Utilize Firebase to store shared tide pool data, and create a single-page application. So to organize our workflow, we used Waffle, which I touched on.
Basically, we use Waffle because I suggested it because I was concerned about that commit issue because we were merging everything into staging, not into master, so we reflect our commits individually. So I decided that we should probably go with Waffle to store our issues and not kind of be our tracking system. Really focusing on moving stuff in progress or done, because we found out that because we are moving into a new branch, it doesn't close the issues, so we had to physically move it.
It's super easy to use.
Yeah.
It really makes the whole structuring of everything and then divvying out everyone's specific what they're actually going to be working on.
Right.
You know what you're doing. You know if it's a bug. You know if it's an enhancement. And then physically, once you know you're done with it, you move it over to done, and it'll close the issue for you. It's integration with GitHub is super easy.
Yeah.
Flawless.
And then you can assign people like that.
Yeah.
And so the APIs that we're using, we have tideandcurrents.noaa.gov API.
Yeah, so we had to utilize a handful of different APIs in order to get all the information that we're wanting to use. So the main one that we're getting all of our information from is tideandcurrents.noaa, which is a government website which brings everything into a JSON file for us, which is super, super easy. And all we needed to do was specify what exactly we were looking for. So if you look right up here, we have our link. This is basically what our GET request would throw in, and we throw in each of the parameters. So you show data getter, which is the main thing that starts everything, and then you specify begin date, end date. In this case, what ours does is we actually have it dynamically generating based off of today, and then goes off for the next day, and then 2 days after that, which we can show in a minute as well. But then there's also we can search by station ID, so station which is close by you, and then you can also have it do the predictions. So right now we have predictions for, this is back in 2013 at one specific instance for 1 6-minute interval. That'll show you the values of where the tide is at that current time. So primarily what it does is it comes back in 6-minute intervals. So you can have it show it for 12 hours and have every 6 minutes show you where your tide is, because it's going to be drastically changing. And then obviously having it coming back in your regular times, and you can change it to whatever time when you're in. We also have it dynamically changing your time zone based off of where the user is, versus just setting it to just the GMT or Pacific Standard Time that we were testing it at, since we're just, as of right now, it's just in Washington. The other thing that we were utilizing was Firebase. We utilized Firebase for all of our storing all of our data. We weren't storing everything that we were grabbing from Tides and Currents, because Tides and Currents has, as you can imagine, since it's in 6-minute intervals and it's showing the begin date, the end date, the time, the value, when it starts, where it's at, station ID, all of this information. If we were to send it all up to Firebase, we just have one hell of a database that we don't necessarily need. So we narrowed it down in our JSON calls and our GET calls to grab specifically what we wanted. So we wanted longitude and latitude, name, station ID, and then the specific URL that we're going towards it. So we have a couple calls in our JavaScript that sends all of this stuff up to our database, and then we reference that database just to grab what we're looking for. We also use this as a deployment method, but it caused quite an issue with Page.js. And yeah, the proxy, which we had to grab Brian on, and we spent a solid 4 or 5 hours on Tuesday, and it was literally just button heads trying to figure out why it wasn't working. And Firebase just does not work with Page.js the way that we were wanting it to use, and then the proxy was also another issue. So it was it's a lot of struggle with it. Firebase is a fantastic resource. This is the second time I've used it, and it's really, really easy to use, but can be difficult when you're trying to leverage other things, for example, like Page.js. But yeah, so then after we deployed it on Monday with Firebase, we got to Tuesday, Wednesday, and we're like, it's not working with Page.js, and decided to redeploy it with Heroku. So just using this now as the database by itself. Yeah.
So here's a Heroku app, which is designed mostly to, it's for mobile, though we have a desktop view, but obviously it was mobile first for sure. So here's the homepage.
Alright, so we integrated Google Maps, and we have an auto complete there, and we created a range where it takes the user's latitude and longitude, and we use it to filter out the tide pool locations. So maybe we'll try Spokane. Spokane doesn't have any tide pool locations. So we have, let's say, no beaches near this location. And then if we do a location that has tide pools, good.
We're not getting our stuff. Let me check mine.
You rang that.
So.
Yeah, you can run it locally from the demo if you need to.
Yeah, well, apparently we might. And I'm on Heroku, yeah. Okay.
And while she's doing that, one of the things you mentioned that would be super helpful to kind of give the 201 students, you talked about how you guys broke it up into staging and dev versus master.
Yeah.
Can you go into a little bit of detail about?
Yeah, our master is pretty clean, right?
Yeah, it's
Go ahead.
you want to keep master clean
Primarily.
just in case something is broken, you can go back to the staging and
The idea is you're having two different environments. You have your dev, which is basically going to have all of your, really all of your commits, and you have your production line, which is any extra stuff. It's live. It's everything that you need it to be. So we immediately, the minute we started it, we had master. We immediately made a staging branch. So anytime we were making any changes during the day, we'd go off of staging, create our new branch, create our issue. Actually, that's one thing we should show as well. Is we had a very, very specific way of creating our branch names so that we knew exactly where we were, and then also utilizing Waffle, because Waffle, when you create an issue, it gives you a number for it. So we would create a branch off of staging that would have our names, we do a dash, and then do the issue number, and then say what exactly it was. So you know exactly where it is. So if like you were to go over into GitHub right now, you'd see a hell of a crazy branches that just have all very specific, but you know exactly what that branch is doing. So if you needed to go back and change anything, and that's just to like prevent any, if you have to go back and you have to revert. Like we had a ton of stuff just stop working a handful of times during the day. So it would just be, it would suck if you had to go revert to something that was like, oh, I haven't made a commit in 2 hours. Well, you just lost 2 hours worth of work, and now you got to go back and redo it. It's like, you don't want to do that, especially when you're only working for 4 days. Like we, a handful of times, just within the past 4 days, we're staying here from 5 till I think Carrie and I left around 8:39 last night. We're just working on it all day, so.
But different things, though, right? So yeah, like naming conventions and a strong git flow process.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Master, staging, feature branches. Features go into staging only, staging or dev, and then that goes into master. Never any.
Yeah. I don't even think we have ours in master.
That's great. So first off, Rick and I are extremely proud of you all for doing this. It makes us want to cry because but yeah, I think that's one of those key points that we stressed a little bit throughout the course, but we really wanted to leave up to the project groups to really kind of determine that git flow process for themselves. And I think this is a great representation of that.
Make life easier for yourself.
Yeah,
actually. Another thing we utilized quite often was pair programming.
Oh, dude, yes.
So you'll notice in our commits that we'll do driver first, navigator second, and then switch off kind of midday.
We'd always do a stand-up in the beginning of the day and be like, all right, where were we at? What do we need to do today? Let's break down each individual part and say, all right, so we know we need to get, because we found at each day that we were doing this project that there was just a lot more stuff that needed to be done just with the functionality alone. That like we have 2 maps that are showing up right now, so it's not working at the current moment. But if you hit on the search menu, that little icon up at the top right, what it'll do is it'll go based off of the our JSON file. So it'll select the ones that we already have here in the multi-select box, and then you can click on that individual box right down there, and it'll show you that spot, give you directions to it, and show you where the tide is at. So getting 2 maps on there to have one show, one hide, we spent 2 hours on that yesterday, and it was just you'd get one thing to show, one thing to hide, but then it would stop working with other things, and it was just, there was a lot of layers of complexity that kept happening.
Those directions?
Yeah.
In that too?
Yeah, it's really, really cool.
Are you using the live stream longitude to cross-reference the specific points between the 2 maps?
Yeah.
Yes.
I can show real quick.
Is it?
I can go back to one of the other branches. Or Whisper. And this also works as an example to show you guys the workflow and everything like that. So within here, you can see that I'm going into this specific branch right here, and I have Brandon Ben Preet, and then we have our specific branch that we are working on. So we can go to 89. Actually, let's go there.
Can you do a git branch to kind of show
Sure.
along? That's pretty cool.
Actually, you can branch test.
Yeah, these are just the ones that I have. There you go.
There you go.
If you guys can see that. I can't see it because of the text, but.
Beautiful. Another thing we did
Look at all
with switching off is we did a git fetch origin, and you can pull down the branch and then work on that branch without having to pull in from staging. And
I don't have any room left on my computer. Yeah. I had to go through and delete like a handful of albums on my computer just to change branches the other day, and apparently I got to do that again. So that's too funny.
No commits left.
No, I literally don't have any room left. Yeah, I got nothing. Literally nothing. There's nothing out there. All right. Well, I would show you, but I can't.
Did you
talk a little bit about like some of the, you mentioned some of the etiquette, like the process between like your work, work
Sure.
etiquette and everything. Like, do you guys have a structure for when you were going to pull down
Yeah.
and or fetch?
Yeah.
In your case.
So the main thing was, so this is actually my second time doing the 301 class, and we set rules the day one, and I also set these rules for when we were doing it. It's like, beginning of the day, do your stand-up, figure out what exactly you're doing today, and then divvying that out, use waffle, whatever you need to do. But then once we get to a point today, like point in the day, we're like, all right, we've made enough commits, we're solid with where we're at, let's do a merge. We would do we did 1 to 2 merges a day, depending on how much stuff that we were doing. And then we would all pull down at the same time and just make sure, like, whenever we did a merge, like, you never merge your own pull requests. Don't do that. It's just kind of, I mean, we can use git blame to find who did it, but it's not a good idea to do that. So whenever we had a pull request that we would do, like, so for example, today when we did all of our CSS changing and everything like that and getting rid of comments and all that, Ben and I were working on that, and then we handed off saying, we made the pull request, can someone review it? Always had someone review it, and then when it's ready, then they merge the pull request, and then we would all pull down, have everything up to date, and then we go on to the next thing. So it may take longer, but it makes it so much cleaner, and it gets rid of any confusion. It gets rid of any like.
The truth is, it doesn't take longer.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It actually takes a long
Yeah, and if
time.
you have to revert too, it's not that bad. Because then you don't have to go that far back.
I want to give Brandon a little hats off here real quick. I've watched this guy go through 2 courses now, and his lingo is on point. Like, it's really awesome. So yeah, I can tell he's learned a lot in this course, as everybody else has too. But yeah, just great job, Brandon.
Is there any other questions you had for it?
I'll
I'll try deleting some stuff real quick so we can get a demo. I'm gonna lose music.
We also did a lot of pair programming, so we had our list of tasks and just kind of paired up and worked on it, and it was really helpful because some of the things we implemented, like the APIs and stuff, it was like a learning experience for us.
There was always something to learn from someone else.
And like one of us was like stronger in functional programming, and it was kind of like
All Carrie. Carrie would come over like, how do we use this math function? Oh, this is how you do it. Just do this, you're good.
So, general consensus 201 students moving into 301. Lots of JavaScript in 301. So, focus as much as you can on JavaScript, as I'm sure all of the students in 301 will tell you, and really focusing on some of the fundamental aspects of JavaScript. So, everything you learned in 201, you're going to take that, you're going to multiply that by about 10, and that's what you get in 301. Yep.
You're going to be using a shit ton of it. Might as well get used to it now.
Yep.
Let's see what we got here in space. Hopefully. Let's see what happens. Also, if you guys aren't already using iTerm, you should. Which is just a different version of Terminal. Because Terminal just has, you can open up separate tabs for Terminal, which is easy. But having multiple things across, it just makes it so much easier. Because I have one that's specifically dedicated to my live server and Node server, so that I don't have to continue to close out of it. I'm also using NodeMon, which is, NodeMon, every time I have to say it, it's great. But it checks for any changes in any local files, or if any local file has been changed, then it updates it. So if we do, let's check it out.
Oh, mine works too. Oh, yours
You got it?
Take it.
Please.
Kind of broken.
Yeah, I don't know. My NodeMon has been weird, and then it's also, Adam just keeps crashing every once in a while, which is great.
Hey, it's like my Adam.
Yeah, right? Do you get the black boxes and then just deletes files? Because that's what mine did.
Oh no, it freezes if you never go.
Oh. There you go. Oh. Yeah, Adam crashed.
No, it's not raining.
No, don't go to the live. Good. If you can go check out into my branch. We did do a get dash. And then go check out the Brandon video. This one right there. Check out because that one will have all the changes for it. Yeah, Brandon then. And dash. In the tab. Or not. It's always presentation day. It's like, oh, you had everything working? Oh, no, it's not how it works.
No, no.
Go to the search menu and see if I can search on it. Okay, well that one's working. Very odd.
So you guys have the NOA API, you guys have the Google Maps API.
And then
you have the
Firebase.
Firebase API.
There was some integration stuff that we had to change, and it proved to be a little difficult with having multiple Google Maps, because if you want to open up the add-on, and we can show them real quick kind of what some of our files were looking like, because if you go into detail view, we wrapped everything in an IFI just because it makes it so much easier, but we have multiple reissues of Google Maps, because we were having one that would find your current location and one that would reference the tides and what we have saved in our JSON file and would reference that, which took some tweaking in order to get. Do you know what's going on with it? Oh well. Well, what it was supposed to do is when you enter in something right down there, it was going to show the next closest beaches right down here underneath it, and then you can click on that one and it would show you where you're going. But not entirely sure why it's not. But yeah.
You're getting there.
It's the tide data retrieving issue.
What were some good debugging, like where you guys did have some issues, like how did you solve like any undefined, for instance?
Console log everything.
Yes.
That's pretty much the majority of what was happening.
Nice.
Because we did a lot of functional programming with a lot of stuff. We were mapping through multiple things and it would map through it again. Because we'd have our array, because if you look over in Firebase has everything nested. So if you just go through and you map through it just to find the first element, to find the key, which is procedurally generated from Firebase, you'll just get the key back and you won't actually get the information that's nested from it, so you have to map through it and then map through it again to find the individual information.
So I got a question. This actually goes out to all the project teams. So in general, you guys got some exposure to functional programming, which just by the nature of using some JavaScript array methods, that stuff is really hard to grasp at first. Do you feel like this really solidified how to use these types of methods by dealing with massive sets of data?
A lot more than it was. It's still not super easy because you really got to understand why and how you're going to be using, say, something like filter or reduce or map, and in what context you're using it. Because you can just map through an array and create another array, but if you're not actually using it for what it's doing, then there's no point in doing it. You can spend your time mapping something and be like, well, it's not returning the information that I want it to. It's like, well, you told it to do that, so it's doing exactly what you wanted it to do or told it to do. Just what you were expecting it to do was something like a filter.
Right. Did you guys use Reduce at all?
Several times.
Yeah.
Nice. Awesome.
I think we used Reduce was the most used in.
Yeah, and
The email side.
Yeah, grabbing the information from Noah. If you want to go into Adam and show him that one. It would be in beach.js. Oh no, tie down. Sorry, tie down. So if you scroll down, yeah, there you go, right down here at the bottom. So this stuff right down here would have, we also found that using Ajax and get.json was working up until there was the proxy issue, which we ran into and didn't expect.
Well, even with that being said, so one of the things that I think all the project teams did was run into issues that weren't expected, but found other solutions that we may not have talked about in class.
Yeah.
That's one of the keys to this whole process, is being able to leverage tools that you may not have used before. I think everybody did a really good job of that, for sure.
You got it?
Found it was.
What was it?
And this is an issue we haven't got to today, and it's probably because the timestamp is changing. So,
There you go.
And unfortunately, so what it's supposed to do is run from today plus time. And this is working before class and with no code changes.
I trust you.
Yeah. So really this should only pull one time, but because I'm going to remove this filter, just so it works. Seattle, United States, and here's the data.
The local ones that are running.
So it was pulling some sort of error because of the time plus start at this time, then add range.
Pulling a different timestamp.
Yeah, something about starting at a specific time and then adding a range was causing an issue, which it hadn't before. Alright, anyways. So this is supposed to just pull up the next one, which should be at 1348 should
So
be the next
148.
tide. Yeah, 148 would be our next tide. So as beaches near us, we have Parky Park, Discovery Park, Golden Gardens. I'll go ahead and go to Discovery Park. Yeah. That's, yeah, here's our detail view. Sorry about everything.
So, like you said, we use a lot of reduce functions to pull out the low and high data. We actually found out that the high and low tides can span over longer than 6 minutes. So we kind of had to reduce it further and map through it and get a better idea of that information and then pull out any duplicates.
Yeah, when we first ran this with our first level reduce, it would be like low tide at 30 seconds, or 30 minutes, so 12:30 a.m. And then it would be like another low tide at 12:36 a.m., which is not what we wanted to have. It should always be low tide, high tide, low tide, high tide.
All right, well, awesome. Any questions out in the crowd? Yay.
You're going to do it from scratch.
The thing that works awesome is routes. So, like, I choose Seattle, Washington, right? And then here I have these results, and then I pass along. I could store a lot of data in a CTX parameter, and then move it along. And that made the detail function really nice and clean. So get detailed tide data, CTX and next. The issue when you're not using routes with a get or an 8 or with a JSON call is that you have to use, it's not like a normal function, it's not like you return a value from a function. That would be great, but it's not. So instead what I ended up having to do was pass in a ton of parameters into the function that I could have stored on the CTX object if I had some sort of middleware in there. I feel like there's probably a more elegant solution to that. Our overall problem, though, this whole week has been technology.
Yeah,
and APIs.
Because Tuesday we were getting information from the NOAA.gov, but it was silently failing and silently throwing errors at us. So it was grabbing information, it was returning it as an object, but it wasn't actually returning the data that we needed.
Yeah, we weren't able to access it.
Yeah. And if we could do it over again, I would say not use Firebase as a deployment, because they're just not used. It doesn't work well with Page. Had we known that, we wouldn't have used Firebase as a deployment. We would have just used it as a resource for database.
So for 201 students who are interested in this, when we talk about actual routes in a single page web application, if she clicks on Bowman Hill, right, you can see that the URL bar changes, right? So now there's this whole new URL. Actually, what's happening is we're still on the same page, and we're updating the browser's history and state that we're on this new location. So it's basically spoofing where you're at. This is huge for performance and things like that. So all of the groups ended up using some sort of functionality similar to this. So it's actually one page, even though it looks like it's multiple pages.
And for finding beaches within a range, it took us a long time to realize that you can't subtract or add decimals. And so we had to multiply coordinates by
100 million.
and then interact with them too, so that we could filter these results down.
That large of a multiplier?
Yeah, well, it's like 6 places or 7, so that we could filter these results down.
That large of a multiplier?
Yeah, well, it's like 6 places or 7 places for.
It was it was hilarious. I came over to go see what they were doing. I was like, why is there 100 million? Like, why are you multiplying it by that? It's like, well, it's the only number that makes it work.
There's your answer, right?
Yeah.
It works.
That's math.
So, tell me about some of the differences between your 201 Project Week versus this 301 Project Week, and any tips you have for the 201 students that are about to begin Project Week.
So you can learn how. So a lot of data. If you want to use custom data from a custom source, you're going to have to probably set up a proxy on your server. So I would learn how to do that. First, look at documentation. Everything seems cool. It's, you find it out later when you're deep in.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes. I will say, so this is the second time I've done the 301. This project was so much harder than the 301 than the project I did in January. Like, this is leagues harder. But what I would say, if you're going to start to do something where you're using a lot of functional programming and a lot of going at your project stuff, be very, very specific with the things that you're working on and communicating with your group. You cannot communicate with your group enough. Because you're doing it in a group together. You're going to be leveraging a ton of but pair programming. Because you're going to play off of each other's strengths and weaknesses, because I'm not great with functional programming. I'm better at it now, but Carrie's just a wizard at it. So like I would drive and she would navigate and be like, here, this is what you're doing. I'm like, okay, well, why does that do that? It's like, oh, well, this is why. You're using your team, utilize everyone, because you're going to be, that's pretty much how it works.
John, you guys are running a project week next week, right?
Yeah.
Nice, works. There you go. Pair programming is not like a big thing. It's something we do in the industry. So yeah.
Pair programming works way better. In 201, we all four would work on a separate ticket and then come together.
Don't work on the same file at the same time.
Well, but one of the problems with that is just creating enough issues in time, making sure that people were understood what their issue that they were working on was supposed to be. Doing two people on a single issue at the same time, it just made it easier to manage the workflow. Like if you had more than 4 people and then like did 6 different issues, it's just, you're going to overlap your code and things are going to happen. Like you're going to work on the same CSS and override each other's stuff.
It's the same thing in I'd say the same thing in 201 or 301 or wherever you go. Know your code, right? Because almost every single pull request that we had, right, there was some type of merge conflict or some type of. But it was so easy to be able to resolve those because you just look at Justin or you look at Marshall or you look at myself or anyone on the team. You're like, oh, I know exactly what that needs to be. Okay, we want to keep this head section, or oh, we want to keep that from the branch, right? But just know your code. And merge conflicts are super easy, super awesome. The sooner you encounter them and embrace them, the better your life will be.
I like that. Embrace the merge.
Well, I mean, you can't avoid them. It's going to happen.
It's meant there to save you.
Yeah.
That's what, yeah.
But know your code, like, I like that, and what I think is a better way to describe that is like everybody should read the pull request. Because if everybody, so when you're working on your own project by yourself, you know every line of code in the project, so it makes sense to you when something's going wrong. Well, when a quarter or a third or 3/4 of the project wasn't your code, when something breaks, you're like, why? Why is my code breaking, or why is someone else's code breaking? And then you have to go learn how the project works. But if you just read all of the pull requests, it tells you what files have been changed and what modifications have been made to each file in the pull request. So if you don't look at that every single time it comes through, you'll be more familiar with like what has been changed, and like that'll give you better preparedness to figure out why your code is breaking in relationship to the code that you didn't write.
And that all relates back to transparency across the entire process, whether that's transparency in your code base or transparency between team members. That is basically the way you get any sort of effective project done, is through transparency on all aspects of the project.
Yeah. I was going to say, add on to that, right? We were reviewing the pull requests and seeing what files have changed. That's awesome. And we hit on it like over and over again in 201 and 301 inside the web interface. But working with some of the team members, it was really cool for them to show me that, oh, you can do all this from the command line. You don't need to be switching back and forth. Git log, get
open.
Yeah. There's so many little git commands that you should familiarize yourself with.
Yeah, Git used to get.
No, pun is always intended.
Yeah, right. So basically, if you're moving into the 301 course, just to give you a heads up, we focus a lot on JavaScript. We definitely focus on CSS quite a bit too. But we really want you to focus on understanding the command command line as much as you possibly can before you move into the 301 course. Otherwise, we're just going to basically slap your hand at UTUs and a GUI. So ultimately, command line is your friend, and JavaScript is more of your friend than any other language ever.
And make sure you edit your C1, otherwise you end up etching into things, you know. And a treehouse is not expensive, it's just $25 a month, right?
Yeah.
So,
I think you get like a 14-day trial fee or something.
yeah, do that.
I want to get you a ruler that says no GUI on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like drilled some command line.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, Duncan likes Bash. You didn't already know that.
I understand.
And the thing that is very different from 201 and 301 is 301 is mobile first. So your media queries are reversed. I say reversed, but that's the new standard.
Yeah.
Well, it's looking at it from here out.
Yeah.
And I would highly recommend that. Our code for this one was 100 lines or less of CSS. For 201, it was 700. Yeah, and that's because we didn't start with global styles. If we did global styles for mobile first, then users would work off of that. So don't save all your CSS till day 4 on your projects. That's very easy to do with 201. So I would do some basic styling on day 1 to go through HTML, like style your paragraphs are.
And you'll learn the whole SMAX thing, so it's being very, very explicit with where and what CSS is going. You have different file folders for your state, for your module, for your layout. You have everything in its specific spot, so it doesn't overlap each other, so that you don't have to worry about, like, we were going over some stuff today, just fixing things, and I was like, oh, wait, this is actually overriding something. We have something that's in our reset styling that's overriding something that we're trying to do at the moment. Like, there's little things like that, but it makes it so much easier to understand it. And when you're trying to go back, because you will be going back over CSS, guaranteed. When you're going back over to try to see what happened and why it's not working and why your floats are floating and not doing the way other things. Yeah, that's the first thing. But like when you go back over it, it's easier to go back into it and dive into saying, oh, I know exactly where this is showing up.
If you guys are curious too, so in the 301 we don't build into the curriculum like a lot of CSS, but I'm a complete CSS nerd, and so I would bring in lots of extra topics on CSS.